there is a moment that arrives without announcement in a man's life. A moment so subtle, he often mistakes it for routine. He sends a message and waits longer than he used to. He plans his evening around the possibility of her reply. He adjusts his tone, softens his edges, rearranges small pieces of himself to fit more comfortably into her emotional weather. He does not call this surrender. He calls it care. He calls it maturity. He calls it love. But something beneath the surface has already shifted, and the woman across from him, whether she knows it consciously or not, has registered the change with the precision of an animal reading wind direction before a storm. I work with men who arrive at my door carrying this heaviness without language for it. They describe relationships that began with electricity and devolved into negotiations. They speak of women who once pursued them with hunger, now pulling away with indifference. And when I ask what changed, they offer the same catalogue of virtues. I became more attentive. I made myself available. I stopped being so closed off. What they do not yet see is that these were not upgrades. They were concessions, and concessions, when offered from a place of fear rather than sovereignty, do not inspire desire. They inspire something closer to pity, or worse, contempt dressed as concern. You have likely felt this in your own life, even if you have never named it. The strange inversion where your increased investment yields decreased respect. The quiet confusion of doing everything the culture told you would make you attractive. Being vulnerable, being present, being emotionally available only to watch desire evaporate in direct proportion to your compliance. This is not an accident. This is not bad luck. This is the operation of a law older than the language we use to discuss it, and it has been destroying men in silence for generations. Carl Jung spent his life mapping the invisible architecture of the psyche, the machinery that runs beneath our conscious justifications and good intentions. He understood that human beings, men and women alike, are not motivated primarily by what they say they want, but by what their unconscious needs demand. And one of the unconscious's most unforgiving demands is this: it cannot respect what it can fully control. A woman may consciously believe she wants a man who bends, who accommodates, who reacts to her every shift in mood and need, but her unconscious, the deeper, older system that determines attraction, desire, and respect, reads that same behavior as a sign of weakness. Not because she is cruel, but because biology has written certain equations into her that she did not choose and cannot override through ideology alone. By the end of this, you will understand exactly why this keeps happening to you and what it quietly destroys if you ignore it. Jung lived through 2 world wars and spent decades watching human beings construct elaborate rational justifications for actions driven entirely by forces they refused to acknowledge. He saw men who believed themselves enlightened, acting out scripts written by wounds they had never examined. He saw women drawn again and again to the very patterns that caused them suffering, unable to break the cycle because they were looking at the surface while the engine ran below. He called this the shadow, the part of ourselves we exile from conscious awareness, the part that nonetheless governs our choices with invisible hands. And here is the thesis that runs through everything that follows. This single idea explains the pattern you have been living inside, without realizing that the moment a man begins to organize life around a woman's emotional reactions, he ceases to be the kind of man her unconscious can desire. This is not a moral judgment. This is structural. It is not about what should be true in an ideal world. It is out what is true in the one we inhabit, the one where attraction is not negotiated through fairness, but generated through polarity, tension, and the presence of something that cannot be easily moved. Most men enter relationships believing that love is a process of merging, of making themselves softer and more available, of proving through constant attention and responsiveness that they are safe. And safe tie is valuable, necessary, even, but it is not the same thing as desire. Desire acquires uncertainty. Erect will rest the feeling that the other person exists independently, that they have a center of gravity that does not shift based on your mood, that they will not abandon their mission to manage your anxiety. When a nab begins reacting to every test, every withdrawal, every subtle shift in her energy, he signals something his conscious mind does not intend, that his frame is not his own, that he's available to be shaped, that high priorities are negotiable. Jung called this the anima, the unconscious feminine principle within a man, the part that connects him to emotion, intuition, and relationship. When TS part is integrated, it makes a man whole. When it is unconscious and running him, it makes him her emotional servant. He does not realize that he is negotiating his sovereignty for the promise of connection. He believes he is being a good partner, but what he is actually doing is abandoning the post she needed him to hold. Let me show you how this plays out in the mundane details of modern life. An meets a woman. At first, is centered. He has his routines, his work, his friends, his gym schedule, and the hours he spends alone with his thoughts. She finds this attractive. Age orbits this gravity. Boa's intimacy deepens. Something inside him begins to whisper that he must now prove his commitment by becoming more available, more reactive, and more attuned to her signals. So he starts texting back faster. He cancels plans when she seems upset. He begins small debates in his mind about whether he should go to the gym or stay and talk through her bad day. He does not see these as abandonments of self. He sees them as acts of care. And here is what she sees, even if she cannot articulate it. A man whose structure is collapsing inward, and a who is no longer moving through the world with purpose, but instead monitoring her mood like a stock ticker, adjusting his behavior in real time to minimize her discomfort, and her unconscious, that ancient evaluator, begins to lose interest. No because she wanted him to ignore her, but because she needed him to remain whole in her presence. She needed the feeling that he would continue to exist, fully formed, whether she stayed or left. The moment he begins to need her approval to feel stable, he has inverted the polarity that generated her desire in the first place. I once spoke to a man who described this exact pattern. He had been with a woman for 2 years. In the beginning, she pursued him. She initiated contact, she made herself available, and he spoke openly about how much she admired his focus and independence. And slowly, he began to relax that focus. He thought he was supposed to. He thought the relationship was the new center. He started planning his week around her schedule. He started asking permission in small, subtle ways. Is it okay if I go out with the guys Friday? He thought he was being considerate, but what he was actually doing was handing her a burden she did not want, the responsibility of being his emotional anchor. And the more he leaned, the more she pulled away. By the time he came to me, she had ended it. He reasoned, delivered kindly but firmly. I just don't feel it anymore. He could not understand it. He had done everything right according to the modern script. He had been present, attentive, and emotionally available. He had violated an older law, one that operates beneath the language of therapy and self-help. He had stopped being a man she had to reach toward, and became instead a man who was always already there, waiting, reacting, needing her to feel whole. Let us go deeper into the machinery of this collapse, because most men do not see it happening until it is already done. It does not announce itself. It begins as a series of small, reasonable adjustments. He notices she seems distant, so he reaches out more. Schuss does not respond with the warmth he expected, so he wonders if he did something wrong. He reviews recent conversations, looking for the offense. He begins to edit himself in real time, sanding down the edges that might cause friction. He stops saying what he actually thinks and starts saying what he believes will keep the peace. This is phase 1, the quiet negotiation with reality. He tells himself this is temporary. Once things stabilize, he will return to his center. Things do not stabilize, rarely do, because the instability was never about external circumstances. It was about the fact that he had begun to source his stability from her reactions rather than his own structure. Phase 2 arrives when he begins to justify the imbalance. She is going through a lot right now. This is just a rough patch. I need to show her I am here for her. These are not lies exactly. They are true enough to be believable. But the obscure, the deeper truth, he is abandoning his mission because he fears what will happen if he does not. He is afraid she will leave. He is afraid she will be upset. He is afraid of the guilt he will feel if he prioritizes self. And so stays in the negotiation, hoping that if he gives a little more, adjusts a little further, softens a little deeper, she will return to the version of herself that wanted him in the beginning. But she will not, because that version of herself wanted a different version of him. She wanted a man who did not need her validation to know his own worth. She wanted a man who could sit with her discomfort without scrambling to fix it, who could let her feel what she felt without making it about his adequacy. She wanted a man who had a life large enough that she could step into it, not a man whose life contracted around her presence. Phase 3 is the full collapse, though he still does not name it as such. By now, he has reorganized his entire existence around managing her emotional state. He wakes up and checks his phone, not for his own reasons, but to see if she has texted. He makes decks about his day based on her availability. He has stopped her going to the gym regularly because he feels selfish to spend their time. He has stopped her seeing certain friends because she does not like them or because it is easier to avoid the tension. He has stopped working on the project that used to excite him because it requires focus, and focus feels like neglect. He does not feel like himself anymore, but he cannot identify the exact moment he lost the thread. It happened in increments too small to mourn individually, and now when he looks at her, he sees someone who no longer looks at him the way she used to. There is a faintness in her gaze, a politeness that replaced passion. She is kind to him, but it is the kindness you give to someone you feel sorry for, and when he rises to talk about it, when he asks what changed, she cannot give him a clear answer, because the root is too uncomfortable to say directly, "You stopped being someone I had to reach toward. You became me and I had to carry." Jung would say that what has happened here is the man has allowed his anima, his inner feminine, to possess him. Instead of integrating the capacity for emotional attunement into his masculine structure, he has let it replace that structure entirely. He has become reactive, accommodating, shapeless, and the woman, whose unconscious is always scanning for signs of strength and stability, has registered this shapelessness as a threat. Not a threat to her safety, but a threat to her attraction. Because attunement, at its root, is the feeling that the other person is whole without you and chooses you anyway. I work with men who describe this collapse in nearly identical terms, regardless of the specific details of their relationships. They all speak of the same slow erosion, the same confusion about how trying harder made things worse. And when I okay them what they gave up in the process, they often cannot remember at first. The mission, the discipline, the hours army, the part of him that existed before she arrived and would continue to exist if she left. They traded hat continuity for the illusion of safety, and in doing so, they destroyed the very thing that made them attractive in the first place. And here is the cruelest part. The woman who later walks away from him will often find herself drawn, within months, to a man who looks remarkably similar on the surface but carries himself with a different frequency. This new man is not more handsome, not wealthier, not more charming in any obvious way, but he is mething the previous man lost. He does not rearrange himself around her moods. He listens buoyed and she speaks, but he does not absorb her anxiety as his own. He cares for her, but he does not make her his entire emotional project, and she finds herself wanting to please him, to earn his attention, to move into his world, because his world does not collapse when she steps back. The man she left watches this from a distance, if he is unlucky enough to see it, and feels the deep sting of recognition. It is not the T, he loved her less. It is that H loved her in a way that consumed him, and consumption is not attractive, it is suffocating. Now let us widen the lens, because this is not just an individual problem. This is a systemic pattern, a feature of the landscape modern men are navigating. We live in a moment where masculinity itself has been placed on trial, where the traditional markers of male strength, independence, stoicism, self-reliance have been reframed as toxic. Men are told, often by well-meaning voices, that the path to healthy relationships is through increased emotional availability, through vulnerability, through the dismantling of old protective walls. And this is partly true. Walls that prevent intimacy do need to come down, but what the culture has failed to clarify is that vulnerability without a stable core is not intimacy. It is dependency. Jung saw this pattern play out on a civilizational level. He watched entire societies swing between rigid patriarchy and chaotic dissolution, unable to find the century where masculine and feminine principles could coexist in balance. He warned her that when a culture demonizes its own pole, the other does not simply disappear. It goes underground into the shadow, where it festers and distorts. Modern men, bombarded with messages that their natural assertiveness is dangerous, that their desire for independence is immaturity, that their need for purpose outside of a relationship is selfishness, have internalized a script that leaves them paralyzed. They do not know how to be strong without being labeled toxic. They do not know how to lead without being accused of control, and so they become passive, reactive, waiting for permission that never comes. And women on the other side of this cultural shift find themselves confused as well. They were promised that the sensitive man, the emotionally available man, the man who listens and adapts would be the answer. But when they encounter such men in the wild, they often feel nothing. Or worse, I feel a kind of creeping frustration, a sense that something is missing. Because what is missing is not kindness or attentiveness, but the feeling of encountering someone who is not available to be reshaped. Someone who yes means something because their no is real. Dating apps have made this dynamic more visible and more brutal. A woman can swipe through 100 men in an hour, each one offering some version of eager availability. The sheer abundance of choice does not make connection easier. It makes it harder, because the unconscious is looking for scarcity, for something rare and solid. A man who presents himself as endlessly flexible, endlessly accommodating, signals that he is common. And the unconscious discards the common without a second thought. Social media amplifies this further. Men watch better, men they desire, receive constant validation from other men likes. Comments, messages, a steady stream of attention that makes any single man's investment seem trivial by comparison. And so he ecolates, thinking he must do more, offer more, be more available, to stand out. But this is precisely backward. In an environment of infinite availability, the man who stands out is the one who is not always available, the one whose time and attention are rationed because they are genuinely occupied with something that matters. The legal and social landscape has shifted as well. Men are navigating an environment where a single accusation, true or false, can end a career. Divorce courts still overwhelmingly FFA women in custody and financial settlements, where the hours of engagement are unclear and constantly shifting, where what was acceptable flirtation a decade ago is now grounds for punishment. I am not interested in debating whether these changes are just or unjust. I am interested in their effect. They have made many men risk-averse, hesitant, and afraid to assert themselves in the very ways that would make them attractive. And so they retreat, not into calculated strategy, but into a kind of numb caution that reads as weakness. Spengler, looking at the decline of civilizations, recognizes attunement. He wrote about the double interphase of a culture, the period when vitality gives way to exhaustion, when men stop building and start maintaining, when the appetite for risk and conquest fades into a preference for comfort and safety. He saw this not as a moral failure, but as a biological inevitability, the natural aging of a cultural organism. Modern men are living in a civilization that no longer believes in itself, that no longer offers clear missions or rites of passage, and the man without a mission will always make a woman his mission, because the need for purpose never disappears. It only redirects. The cost of staying blind to this pattern is steep. A man who sacrifices his sovereignty for the promise of relational security does not gain security. He gains a slow dissolution of self, a quiet paranoia that he is never doing enough, a creeping resentment that he cannot express because he has framed his own choices as virtues. He becomes smaller or bitter, more confused. He looks around at few men who seem to navigate this landscape successfully and assumes they have some secret knowledge, some trick he has not learned. But it is not a try-hey, it is a refusal to participate in the inversion. It is the simple, difficult practice of remaining whole. If a system demands your vulnerability but offers no protection, walking away is not cowardice, it is wisdom. And if your increased investment in a relationship yields decreased respect, the problem is not that you are not investing enough. The problem is that you are investing from the wrong place. You are investing from need, not from overflow, and need repels. So what does it actually look like to move differently in this landscape? Not as a list of tactics, but as a shift in the underlying structure of how you relate to yourself and to women. This is not about playing games or adopting some performance of indifference. It is about recovery the part of yourself that existed before you learned to trade your sovereignty for approval. First, notice when you are reacting rather than responding. The reaction is automated, immediate, and driven by fear of what will happen if you do not comply. Response is deliberate, grounded, arising from your own sense of what is true and right. When she withdraws, your first instinct may be to pursue, to fix, to ask what is wrong and how you can make it better. This is a reaction. It assumes that her withdrawal is your responsibility, that your job is to manage her emotional state. A response, by contrast, would be to notice her withdrawal, to allow it space, to continue living your life with the assumption that she will return to balance when she is ready. and that if she does not, you will be fine either way. This is not coldness. His is trust. Trust she is capable of her own emotional regulation, and trust that her momentary mood does not determine your worth. Second, stop pretending that merging is the goal. You were told that intimacy means becoming one, that a healthy relationship is characterized by constant communication, constant availability, and constant emotional sharing, but this is a recipe for suffocation. Real intimacy requires attractiveness. It requires that you have a life she's invited into, not a life that exists only in relation to her. This means protect your time, your routines, your mission. It means saying no when yes would compromise something essential. It means letting HR be disappointed sometimes, and trusting that her disappointment is not the end of the world. Third, refuse to negotiate your frame. Your frame is the structure through which you interpret reality, the set of principles and priorities that guide your decisions. When you enter a relationship, there will be subtle and overt pressure to adjust this frame to match hers. She will want you to see certain things as important that you do not. She will want you to prioritize activities or relationships that do not align with your mission, and you will feel he pull to comply, because compliance seems like love. But every time you adjust your frame to avoid conflict, you weaken the structure that made you attractive in the first place. Hold your frame, rigidly, not defensively, but calmly. Let her press against it. Let her test it. When she sees it does not collapse. She will feel something she cannot find in a man who bends with every breeze. Safety. Fourth, allow her to react while you remain unmoved. This is perhaps the hardest practice because it requires you to sit with discomfort without trying to resolve it. She will test you, not consciously, maliciously, but instinctively. She will withdraw, create small conflicts, and watch to see if you will abandon your center to chase her approval. And your job is not to ignore her, not to dismiss her feelings, but to remain grounded in your own, to listen, to acknowledge, and then to continue being who you are. This is what Jung meant by integration. You are not exiling emotion. You are allowing I to exist without letting it possess you. Fifth, begin to move as if your mission is the center, and with her orbiting it, not the other way around. This is not about making her feel unimportant. It is about recovering the natural order that generates attraction. When your life is genuinely full, when you are working towards something that matters, when you are building something, when you are engaged in a discipline that requires your presence, she will feel the gravity of that. She will want to be part of it. But if your life is empty and she is the thing you are trying to fill it with, she will feel the weight of that expectation and it will repel her. Every one of these practices is rooted in the same core principle. You must recover the part of yourself that exists independently, the part that does not need her approval to feel stable, the part that can be alone without feeling incomplete. This does not mean you do not care for her. It means you care for her from a place of fullness rather than from a place of need. And that distinctio changes everything. There are two futures available to you from this moment forward. You can ignore what has been laid out here, dismiss it as harsh or reductive, and continue moving through your relationships with the same patterns that have been quietly destroying your self-respect. If you choose this path, let me show you where it leads. In 5 years, you will be smaller. You will have learned to edit yourself even more carefully, to anticipate her moods with even greater precision, to make yourself even more available in the hope that this time it will be enough. But it will not be enough, because the problem was never that you were not giving enough. The problem was that you were giving from the wrong place. You will find yours LF in relationships that feel more like hostage negotiations than partnerships. You will feel a queer bitterness that you cannot express, because you have framed your own choices as virtues. You will look at me, who seem to navigate this landscape with ease, and feel a dull resentment, because you are doing everything you were told to do, and it is not working. You will be more alné, even when you are with someone, because the version of yourself that could connect authentically has been buried under layers of accommodation and self-abandonment. Or you can take this Asan initiation. You can see this mum and tea as the threshold where you stop negotiating with reality and start living in accordance with it. If you choose this P-tie, the beginning will be harder. You will have to unearn patterns that feel like kindness but are actually fear. You will have to let some people be disappointed. You will have to sit with the discomfort of not fixing, not chasing, not explaining yourself into approval. You will lose some relationships because not every woman wants a man who holds his center. Some want a man they can reshape, and when you stop offering that, they will leave. But the ones who stay or arrive afterwards will be different. They will respect you in a way the others did not, because respect is not something you can negotiate for. It is something you earn by being someone worthy of it. In 5 years, if you'll take this path, you will have fewer people in your life but deeper connections. You will have less ice but more clarity. You will have walked away from situations that required you to betray yourself, and that walking away will have built something inside you that cannot be taken. Self-respect. You will not need he to feel whole, and because you do not need her, she will want to stay. This is the paradox. We must learn to live inside. The path of sovereignty is not the path of ease. It is the path of integrity. It is the path where you stop asking, what do I need to do to keep her? And start asking, what do I need to do to remain myself? And when you start asking that question, everything changes. So here it is, stated. The moment a man begins organizing life around a woman's emotional reactions, he ceases to be the kind of man her unconscious can desire. This is not an opinion. This is a pattern. It has been playing out in your life, whether you have named it or not, and it will continue to play out until you take responsibility for the parts you are participating in. She does not destroy your mission. She reflects its absence. If you had a mission large enough, compelling enough, real enough, her moods would be whether you noticed, but did not let define your direction. The problem is not her TTs. The problem is that you cheat AF, failing them by treating them as emergencies rather than information. The solution is not to be cold or indifferent. The solution is to become whole. If this hits something in you, if you felt the recognition of a pattern you have been living inside, then do not let it fade. Share this with the men in your life who need it. Subscribe to this work so it can reach the ones still suffering in silence. Keep this conversation there, because the culture will not do it for you. The culture benefits from your confusion. You were not built to kneel, you were built to build.